Hello, everybody. Is there an intro? I don't know how this works. Is there a banner?
There's some kind of music that we can play, but it's okay. We're running a bit late. I had some
Yeah.
technical difficulties, so um, let's just crack
So,
on.
hi, everybody. I am Jeff. This is my first attempt at doing one of the eCHO live streams. And this is Nico. I think you saw him on the last edition, which was the French language edition, right? So, he is old hat at this point, but he's here to talk to us today about the advanced features of the Kubernetes Gateway API that Cilium actually is able to implement, and you can get into production. But off the top, let's start with just covering the news items. And because it is the week that it is, everything is about the upcoming European KubeCon and CiliumCon next week, like all things KubeCon, basically. So let me see if I can switch to the the big thing is we are hosting CiliumCon as a add-on to the KubeCon next week, right? And so a one-day event on the 18th, and we have some really great speakers. I wish I could be there. Unfortunately, passport issues are crazy in the US. It took
Right.
forever to get my passport, and I just couldn't make it. Like 12 weeks to get your passport renewed is ridiculous. Anyway,
I've got to ask. And last conference you went to, you dressed up as a bee.
yeah.
So who's going to be hold the torch to be the bee costume?
I don't know if anyone stepped up to be the human being at this one. But I'm pretty sure I will be picking that back up if I get to go to the North American KubeCon later this year. But uh, in the meantime, it's a great segue. In the meantime, we've actually just released today, right? Uh, the new eBPF project. So we're actually taking all of the B avatars that you've seen as stickers at the booths, and we've collected them now in a repository under a permissive CC license, right? And non-commercial use attribution license, so you can actually use these yourself and as part of the community and basically go wild with the hive of little bee avatars that have been created for conference talks and the booth stickers in the past. So this is really fun. We've actually, I'll just go into the repository. We've actually created some backstories for each bee, right? And so as we find more of these, we'll be adding more. And I think, in fact, right now, just today, because we announced it, some other people basically already found more that we didn't see than when
Can you share the
were.
repo, because we can only see I can only see the blogs.
Oh yeah, the repository is GitHub isovalent /eBPF. But yeah, just I'm not sure how to do the eBPF repo, right? So the backstories for each bee as part of the hive of bees. So that's my big announcement for this episode. I put some work into creating some of these backstories, and it's super fun. I love the whimsy of the bee avatar. It's super cute, and always gets a smile. The bee stickers are more popular than my bee outfit so far, I think, but I might change that. I have to up the look every time I do it. But so that was the big announcement. today we just released that. But the other thing, I want to also show the other big announcement from this week is the fact that Cilium Enterprise is now available in the Microsoft Azure Marketplace. So that's actually something that's been worked on behind the scenes for a while, right? It always takes some effort with the partners to get the things into their marketplaces, right? So this is actually a pretty big deal in terms of providing access to the enterprise Cilium in a turnkey way on Microsoft's Azure cloud, right? So this is pretty cool. So that, what else? Oh, I guess, so we had CiliumCon. The other big thing that's going on event-wise is, we are still doing the workshop tour in Europe, right? I think Duffy, I guess a couple episodes ago, Duffy covered a lot of this. And I guess the big thing is like there's sort of a break in April because of KubeCon, right? So it's sort of like everyone needs a couple of weeks to decompress after next week, and then in May it'll pick back up again. And there's a lot in May, right? There's like 5, 6 in May, and it just keeps going. So it is going all through June and May, it looks like, and then one last one in September, because clearly July is another conference intensive month. So I think that's all the goings on at the events for the next week. So, and
yeah, and you get the as well the Bea wrote a blog post on Cilium.io with all the Cilium related sessions through KubeCon. So not just
right,
CiliumCon, but I just want to share this as I'm here. Cilium talks. Share this. It's pretty impressive, the number of sessions. Some of them are presented by us of them people, of course. We've got the why we created Cilium with Thomas. Some sessions by folks at Microsoft who, as Jeff just mentioned, are partnering a lot with ISO around supporting Cilium on AKS. Then we have more like users testimonials and stories from IKEA, New York Times, Bloomberg, Datadog. There are some observability sessions from Anna, security, more hands-on session from Tracy and Duffy on Tetragon. So that's where you'll be able to do one of the labs, I believe. This is always a popular session, the Cilium updates with Liz, she'll be running the session. And there is another session which I think is going to be again super popular. Is the last one of the last one of KubeCon, which is Liz's multi-cloud Cilium session, which I think is going to get people buzzing for sure.
Yeah, I'm hoping that they're all recorded. I think they are, right? So
yeah,
because there's actually a virtual pass if you can't attend live, like me. I'm hoping the virtual pass gives me access to all of these so I can attempt to run European hours and watch some of these things live.
We should have said it's you are based in Alaska, and
the
time
yeah.
difference is right now it's 4:04 here in the UK, 4:04 p.m.
Yeah, it's 7. It's just after 7 a.m. my time. So, but the sun's been up for like 3 hours for me because it's already after solstice. So pretty soon, like in another month, I won't even notice time of day. I mean, I'm in that magic time in Alaska where there's like 2 months where you actually experience a change in light level, right? Because in the winter it's like dark, in the summer it's just light, and then in the month around solstice you're like, oh, I can pretend to live in a place where there are night daytime variations.
Fantastic.
Oh, you mentioned the labs. I think there's a new lab, right? Because like a couple of sessions ago, Duffy was on the Echo. They went through migrating to Cilium, right? And I think the new lab is a migration. So it picks up on the episode from a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, that's the latest lab. That's, I think, the 20th we've got now available. Actually, I can just show this quickly. Let's have a look. Here we go.
I haven't actually done that one yet, but I'm assuming it probably runs pretty close to what they sort of lived demonstrated in the Echo a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, that's right. What Duffy, I think, was Nick was there as well. Went through was from going from Calico to Cilium. In the lab, we're using Flannel as a like
right, as a starting point, right?
Yeah. But it's pretty much the same process. What I liked about it is, I guess in the episode you will see, but essentially what we're doing is we're building another overlay network, and we're running both of them in parallel. And during the migration, what we have is that we actually still have connectivity between a pod connected to Flannel to a pod connected to Cilium, right? And you see that in the lab. You can get them to talk to each other. You see the different IP addresses range that they pick, and you check the connectivity. And it's, that's a question I get often when I when I go to conferences and stuff, and people are like, well, how do I migrate, right, to Cilium? So hopefully now we have a kind of consistent way of migrating from any other CNI to Cilium. So go and check it out. Let us know. Does it make sense? It's kind of a new approach using a new CRD. I'm sure that's going to be more kind of automation on top of it. I think so far it's what we're seeing. The lab is with a very small kind cluster with just 3 or 4 nodes, but at scale we need some automation that is going to be built on top of it. But I think it's a good start.
Cool. Yeah, I guess the big thing is now you don't have to cut over, right? Like you don't have to shut down your connectivity to set up the new Cilium overlay network. You can actually keep them both running, and so you can basically make sure the new network path is working before you shut down the old one, and that is going to help a lot of people, I imagine.
Yeah, no, for sure. Awesome.
Oh, okay. I guess that's probably all the new news, right? There's going to be a lot. I think next week maybe we'll hopefully have a recap of some of the talks and stuff. But let's dive into the advanced gateway API discussion, which is like, I think the gateway API upstream is really, really interesting. I think like the fact that the ingest stuff, everyone was sort of had to do it their own way for a little bit, right? Because and then the gateway basically is a way to cycle back and make it extensible, so you can get some advanced features that were in individual ingress products, and it's really interesting. But I'll let you show the demo.
Yeah, and it's, like you said, I think it's good to kind of, before I go into the more advanced use cases, it's good to talk about why gateway API, why are we doing this? And Jeff, as you just said, we used to have the ingress API resource, which is still very commonly deployed, but every tool or vendor came out with their own customized ingress annotations to support different use cases. and it worked fine, but it was very inconsistent, and you couldn't just easily migrate from one to another.
Yeah. And that's, that's a strength and it's a pro and a con. Like annotations are super flexible, right? And they let you get access to features. You don't have to be slowed down, right? But so that's the plus side. The downside is like you just end up filling the space with annotations that are varied, and it's good to see the community coming back again and again, right? And taking a look at that and like, hey, we have these patterns now. Let's all work together and make something that is more consistent. That because that's the cycle of innovation, right? Like you have to have something that's flexible, and then it's clearly used, and then let's now sort of standardize it and make it in a much more sustainable, programmatic, declarative way now, right?
Yeah. Which I found super interesting because Kubernetes is still pretty new to me already, recent, but they've taken some of the lessons learned from running Ingress for 3, 4, 5 years to say, okay, that's working, but let's do better. And then came up with a new gateway API standard. There's been a couple of eCHO shows. There's one where Nick Young, who is one of the kind of service mesh leader at ISO Venom, who's one of the maintainers of the Gateway API, had a great chat with Liz about the origins of the project. Again, we'll add this to the show notes. And then I came on maybe a month ago to talk about Cilium 113 with Dan. And again, I did a brief demo of the Gateway API. And yeah, the idea today was more to talk about some of the more advanced features that we have with, that we see people interested in. And it's actually a new lab, which I hope will be out in a couple of weeks. There's already a Cilium Gateway API lab on isovenom.com/labs. Again, just do it at your own time. This one is a brand new one. Again, we go a bit deeper about some of the capabilities you can do with the Gateway API. Right. Sure. So should we get started?
Yes, please.
All right. Okay. So hopefully you can see my screen well enough. So again, you can see that this is my kind of lab environment, which is pretty much what you will see when the lab is live. And we're going to look at a couple of different use cases. But again, if you think about what is Gateway API? Gateway API is about how you route traffic into your cluster, right? And we are going to see how we can manipulate the inbound traffic and either do some load balancing or modify actual packets, modify the response to the packets. And in the last demo, we're to do something called cross namespace routing with the Gateway API to essentially have a shared gateway that will be used by multiple namespaces. So yeah, again, if there's any questions, again, anybody can just jump in on the chat and ask some questions.
Yeah, actually, we have one question already. Can this run in a home lab? In the cluster IPAM, should it still be IPAM Kubernetes?
Yeah, so can it run on a home lab? Yes. So all these environments we're using in the labs is based on kind. So it's not like a proper cluster. The only thing we need is Gateway API automatically creates a service of the type load balancer, right? So that's how we kind of exposed that a service to the outside world. And the load balancer service needs to be allocated an IP address or host name. and in the cloud, it's done automatically for you. When you have your home lab, you have to use something like MethodLB to allocate an IP. So in the lab, we actually use MethodLB, and I think probably you will see here, we've got some MethodLB that will attribute an IP address, and that will be the one that you access to, and to access your services into your cluster. But that's, again, as long as you run MethodLB, you should be able to replicate this these tests.
Yeah, that's probably the only piece that like a quick and dirty home lab environment doesn't come with out of the box, right? It's just something to handle the load balancer service type.
Yeah. Now we've got we release this load balancer IP address management feature in 1.13, which enables you to allocate an IP to a service, but you still need the ability to either you need to advertise this IP with BGP, or you need to do it at the layer 2, which isn't something we support just yet. So right now, I would say still use MethodLB in your home lab, or you'll have to use BGP to peer with a different, your internal network.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, thanks for the questions. So again, if you haven't done the first lab, I recommend you do it, and we'll provide a bit more context and explanations about what is the gateway API, how does it work. But I guess the main thing is before you deploy, you install the gateway API. You need some CRDs, and we'll see we've got them. A number of CRDs deployed. We've already deployed them as part of the deployment of this lab. And what we've got is Cilium 1.14.0 snapshot.1, which is like a very early release version of 1.14. Now, most of the features I'm going to show today, they're supported on 1.13 already. But if you want to play with literally the latest Cilium features, you can use this 1.14.0 snapshot 1 version. Cool. So,
and it's always good to get testers on the snapshot versions anyway. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we started to produce snapshots. I think isn't this the first release where there's been a public snapshot?
Yeah. Now we had the release candidates in 1.13, which kind of came on the run up to the release of 1.13, but they were like very late in the development process.
Mm-hmm.
The snapshots, they come very early in 1.14. I think 1.14 won't come out until the summer. So, and there's going to be a number of snapshots for people to try, like the latest version. So, snapshot 1 actually adds the early support for MTLS, which is a feature that people have already, been really excited about and asking for, again, for service-to-service authentication in your service mesh. And I am sure there will be an eCHO show about this in the coming weeks and months.
Yeah, and in fact, the latest Cilium install tool actually has support for the snapshot release pattern too. So you can actually select. It's not the default, but it's now listed in the versions, and so you can actually download this and install it. So it's super easy, and I really encourage everyone who can run these snapshots in the home lab and play with the new features early. It just helps. It helps everybody, right?
Yeah.
The earlier you can do it, the faster we can identify things that need to be fixed in the new features. So
for sure. Awesome. So first thing I wanted to show is something called just traffic splitting, which is just essentially some load balancing weights that you can attribute to your traffic. And it can be used for things like A/B testing or canary deployments, where you say, I want, you start with like 100% of the traffic going to, service, prod, and then you send 1% to service alpha or beta, and just you see how people react, and if there's any feedback when people are testing the new version of the application, and then it's just a way to introduce a new version of a service into into your for your users. And that's kind of natively integrated with the Gateway API. So what I start the demo with, and I'm going to use that sample application for most of the demos, is we deploy some some services and some pods and service. And what they do is these pods are going to reply to my curl request with the name of the pod and node of the receiving server. And we're going to use that information to know where the pod, where the traffic lands, if it lands on service eCHO-1 or eCHO-2. So we've got our pods, they're running. And now I'm going to go and deploy my gateway. All right, so let's go and do that. So let's have a quick look at the gateway configuration. So it's gateway configuration is pretty simple. You just have, as we're using the Cilium gateway API, you just have to specify Cilium here as a gateway class. And then you have to say on which port the gateway is listening. So we're just listening on port 80 here. And then the definition of your routes are in the next user file, which is this one. So what we're doing here is we've attached that route to the Cilium gateway here, right? So that's why we're referencing it. And we'll see that we use this something called rules, where if we match a specific pattern, for example, if we match a specific path, so if the traffic goes to port 80/echo, we will send that traffic to our backend, which is service eCHO-1 over port 8080 or service eCHO-2 over port 8090, right? And see, you get the weights that are 50-50 here. So what we're doing here is we're just load balancing the traffic that is coming between the two services. Cool. That makes sense so far?
Yeah, in fact, this goes back to you mentioned there's already an existing lab for the gateway API, and I think all of this is covered in the existing lab. So anyone after this wants to go and run that lab, they'll be able to get hands-on the basics of the gateway.
Yeah. But going back to what we said before about what would you need in a home lab, and we said we need a method LB, something like method LB to allocate an IP address to your service, and that's the IP address allocated by method LB. Mm-hmm. So if we look at my gateway, see that's its IP address. So we are going to send some traffic to that IP address over port 80 to the /echo path, and that traffic will be distributed between eCHO-1 and eCHO-2, right? But again, IP address is something that has to be allocated by another tool, and we use method LB for this. So we're going to go and get an IP, and we're going to make a curl request. Now, you see, when I make a curl request to this eCHO server, As you can see, because we're using making that request with /echo, it matches this path here. And that's sent to my echo server, and the echo server replies with the name of its own node, pod, and the traffic is sent, it's echo2 received that packet. And if I do it again, we should see echo-1 replying as well. So the traffic is balanced between echo-1, echo-2. And again, that's if I do a quick loop and store the result of this curl commands into a little text file and count the reply, it's roughly 50-50, right? So we got a bit more on echo-1, but it's more or less evenly split because we have the weights of 50 and 50. So again, just a quick way to just make sure that the traffic is balanced as we expect.
We got a question. This is actually a good question about the splitting. So, how automated is the traffic splitting? Will it stop the split if it starts seeing errors returning? So in this case, if Echo2 service started going unhealthy, or well, I guess there's two different ways to look at that question, right? There's if it just starts producing 404s or something, but the service itself, all the backends are still technically healthy from a health check standpoint. What happens? And then what happens if the service basically goes unhealthy and it can't? There's no backends for that Echo2 service in a healthy state. Because that's sort of two different ways that errors could be produced, right?
Yeah, I mean, I imagine that I am pretty sure that if the service become unresponsive, based on the health checks that you've got on running for your service, that it will be taken out of the equation. And maybe something we can test later on if we get a chance. But it's a good point. But I'm pretty sure that would be the case, that if a service becomes unresponsive, then therefore the algorithm will say, well, I'll just send the traffic to the one that is available.
Right. Well, like I said, this is a snapshot release. People can we can test this later. The other situation, I guess, is probably more common, especially if you're doing A/B or canary testing, is if the new beta service is rolled out and starts producing 503s or something. What happens? And I guess from my point of view, I would want to look at that with something like Hubble flows and start tracking that and do a normal remediation process, right?
Yeah, 100%, and that's exactly what I was going to say. I'm not sure Cilium itself will be smart enough to know exactly how to deal with this, but you need your observability on top to go and work out what's going on and how to fix it.
I mean, that's why you're doing the A/B testing anyway, right? I mean,
Yeah.
You're going to have some automate. If you're doing the A/B testing, either you have someone watching that, or you have some automation that basically kick it back based on what your error budget is, right? Because I imagine ideally you'd have something that's watching the metric you care about, and you've labeled. Oh, I guess this is a good example of why. If you go back to the other lab, there's an example of how to rewrite the HTTP request with new labels. You can actually set up a metric, like a Hubble metric, looking for that label, right? So you can keep up with the errors associated just with your beta release, right?
Yeah.
And then do your remediation around that and basically change this manifest to basically kick the beta out of the equation, right?
Yeah. No, that's for sure. Cool. So Now, I just wanted to show again what happens if I change the weight to 99 and 1. So I've just gone and edit directly the API of the root. And
This is a more traditional canary situation, right? Where you're like, 1% of our users are now our beta testers.
Yeah. So just check. Oops. Yeah, so we got 99 going to echo-1 and 1 going to echo-2. In theory, again, it's and I'm not exactly entirely sure if it's like the algorithm behind it, because it's never been like exactly 50-50. It's not, doesn't seem to be, even when it's 50-50, doesn't seem to be like round robin. I would have assumed there would be some kind of, and these things being very even, but it's not. I don't know exactly how it works under the hood. But it's same with when I do 99 1. So see, 3,242 requests were made to echo-1 and only 27 to echo-2. So again, it's not quite 99 1, but it's thereabouts.
I wonder if it's using. I have to look at this. I wonder if it's using the Geneva algorithm that is implemented in eBPF, because that was already one of the features, right, in the ingress support in 113, and that's a good question. But I would imagine it picks up on that work and is basically taking that load balancing work that we were using with the Q proxy replacement, right, and applying it at the ingress, but the gateway point.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. Like this feature does require Q proxy replacement, and it's all using kind of Envoy to manipulate all the traffic. Cool. So that's the first demo. Hopefully, that's kind of clear how we do this, and it's just just a fun little way to do some kind of introduce a new app again without having to use a different tool. And that's what I like about a lot about the stuff with Cilium is the fact that if you're using Cilium because it's your CNI, you can use it for a lot of the other stuff like your encryption, your gateway, whatever. It's, what other kind of requirements you have in your BGP. You don't need to have another tool for this. Cool. Now, there are a couple of other things, and we'll see if we get the time to do the response as well. But one of the things we can do with the Gateway API is to modify the header of your HTTP requests, and it's really more like using, using Cilium as a proxy, or like L7 load balancer. If you've been using that, I don't know, F5 or Cisco ACE in the past, that's the kind of weird stuff you might need to do for your application owners might ask you to do things like add a header or change a header or remove that header. And it's actually something that is built into the Gateway API as one of the features. Cool. So I'm going to go and deploy another HTTP routes. So we're going to go and do this one. So the way we're going to demo this is by trying with and without. So again, we're using a HTTP routes, which is attached to our Cilium gateway. And again, we are sending the traffic to that path over to that backend over this port. So if I make exactly the same requests, so what you can see is, again, this echo server replies in the body of the text with the original request headers. So in the original, and we can also see this with a verbose curl, right? That's in the that's the outgoing curl request is to this IP address to that port, and it's a get, right? / Cilium add a request header, and the traffic is sent to this service for port 8080. So that's fine. So what we do, so what you can do with gateway API is you can actually use something called a filter. And we have different types of filters. But one filter essentially lets you add a header. So you just say you can add multiple headers, you can remove headers, set the value, whatever. And what you have to do is just have to give it the name of the header and the value of the header. So we're going to reapply this and run the same command again. And now you can see here, you can see that the echo returns me with the value of the header, which was added by the gateway API as the traffic was coming into the cluster. So you look before, we had accept host user agent, X forwarded proto, X request ID. And now we have accept host, and now we have this new one has been inserted into my HTTP header by the gateway API. Make sense?
Yeah. So in this example, you have the filter scoped to at the top level of the rule, like not scoped to the back end. I think that I was looking at the gateway API documentation. I think it also supports putting the filter like this per backend. So when you have two different services, I think you can actually modify the request differently. So you can add a different header for different services. That's another way to track. I haven't had a chance to test it, but I think from the documentation, I think it actually supports the filters scoped a layer below. So
nice.
So you can have different headers for the different services. So you can actually tag it as beta in the header. So even if you're doing like working with anything that's doing tracing and capturing the headers, you'll be able to catch that too. So that's another way to probably to observe any errors when you're doing sort of an A/B situation.
Yeah, and actually, it's good segue. I really like the documentation of the gateway API, and there are also a couple of typos that I've picked up. There you can contribute. You can fix them. It's all the documentation is on GitHub, so they're always welcome. Like changes like this. So configurator, all the references, and you can see all the different types of API. So actually, we can probably share something, do something different. Is we can remove header, and I think this time what we, if I remember correctly, you just have to put a list of the headers you want to remove. So if we want to remove X request ID, we're going to remove this one here. I think that's the format it's expected. So I'm going to reapply and see that X request ID header is gone. So again, that's just something else that you might want to do is to remove a header, and you can also do that.
So we got a new question. I doubt either of us know the answer to this, but okay. When will the gateway API be GA? And I have no idea. That's an upstream SIG question, I think.
I believe that's going to be this soon. I don't know, but I was yeah, I believe that's going to be some point this year, but I'm not I'm not sure exactly, but I think I feel like I read something on the Kubernetes channel. There's a SIG gateway API channel on the
Mm-hmm.
Kubernetes Slack, which you can join. Again, just to go and contribute, but I may have seen something there, but I think that's just a matter of months. But yeah, don't quote me on that. It's just my my understanding.
Oh, I skipped a question. This is actually more back to the on point on the demo, right? Can you have the YAML add the value on conditional basis? For
Mm.
example, if the header field equal value 1, then add header x equal y. I'm not sure the API gateway is
Well,
there yet.
actually, what you can do with the gateway API is you can, and it's something we've got in the first lab, is
Oh, you can do matches, right?
you can do matches, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me see if let me share something else. Go.
Yeah, I think I saw an example of this in the upstream docs when uh they had an example where it was like a cookie example where if the cookie already exists, do one thing,
That's
else
it. Yeah.
add the cookie
Yeah.
as a separate rule. Like I said, like the API is super expressive in terms of where the filtering and the match rules can happen in terms of scope. So um you can I think you can get there. It's just maybe not as straightforward as like it's not going to be like a regular expression syntax.
Yeah, you can. So, but like you said, so you can you can use the matches. So if your root matches a specific header, so not just the path prefix, but also
Right.
a header, then you can apply the specific filter.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I can't see I can't see why not.
Yeah, it's just a matter of once you wrap your head around how the matching syntax works,
Yeah,
and then I think you can actually put filters underneath the match. So you can do that. You just have to break it up. There's like the conditional is the match language, and then the filter is the whatever you do after you've matched that. So it's like selector logic, right? It's just that
yeah,
now it's match logic.
yeah. Actually, we'll see another selector logic in the next one. So the one thing I was going to just final show is we talked about Hubble before. You mentioned
Mm-hmm.
Hubble to to do the kind of observability aspect. Um, you can what's pretty awesome with Hubble is the kind of layer 7 stuff as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you can say, I want to look out for traffic based on, again, a different type of filter. So I want to know the traffic that is HTTP method get. Right? So you look out for all the HTTP traffic with a /get, or the status code 200. Again, that's just traffic that is going, replies that have been successful. Or you can filter based on the path, which again, I think just regenerates some in here. I think after a while, here we go. You can see again the traffic being sent, and you can see the reply back. So yeah, that's just when you play with something like well, you play with anything Cilium, I think it's always good to say, okay, how would I operate this outside of the easy lab environment, right? It's and you would have some kind of observability, and Hubble would probably be a part of that.
I would imagine if you're doing something like an AB, you would also make sure you have the correct Hubble metrics so that you could drive those the denied verdicts for that back into something that can then remediate, right? So that's all possible. It's just a matter of now you have the ability to do the AB in a and turn it on and off like really quickly. So
yeah, for sure. Cool. Right. So there is something else is similar, which is the response, which is again imagine the traffic goes through the north south through the gateway API. What we've seen is the gateway API adding a header to the request. You can do is take the response back and add a header, or again rewrite the header. That's like a brand new feature that's not actually part of the standard gateway API. It's on what they call the experimental channel of the gateway API. So what you have to do before you actually use this feature is you have to deploy the experimental gateway APIs. And there are more. Can go to the gateway API website, explain some of that stuff, but it's pretty much the same thing we saw before. You've got a filter. I think we're using this one here. And this time the filter is called response header modifier. And the thing we do here is we're just adding 3 headers to the reply coming back from the pod. And we'll see this quickly. We just need to use again. So again, the reply was successful, and if we use /v again, if you use verbals, you can see that in the header of the replies, you see the 3 headers added by the gateway API. Right, that's just a way to visualize this. I could run like TCP dump or something like this, but this using curl and -v give you that visibility of the headers of the replies as well.
Yeah, I imagine this is going to be super useful for any of those A/B testing, where you can now label the responses. So if that server, that beta service, is providing something not correct in terms of the response data, the thing it's talking to, that service will have information about whether it was talking to the beta server or not. So even though from a Cilium standpoint, everything got through the system, the network, the client may not get the right data packet because it was a beta implementation or something. And so now you can actually track that by flagging all of that just in the route, so that the service, the application, doesn't have to tag itself as beta, because that's contextual, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. And you can start combining some of the features together that we're talking about today. And actually, in this new lab, we've got a new badge, which so at the end of this lab, you'll have an exam, and you'll have to use a couple of different features that we're showing today and make them work together, and show that for a specific use case. But cool. Can you stay on for a few more minutes for?
Yeah.
Awesome. I know we're kind of we're going on, but this is like probably the most interesting aspect of the whole.
Oh yeah, this is super interesting. If you have multiple teams in your org, and you can basically now take some of the responsibility associated with ingress away from your app teams. This is super useful, I think.
Yeah, and actually the example that they use in in the official documentation, it's a different one than the one I've done in the lab. But what they've got here is so essentially what we've got here is multiple namespaces for different products or different business units, whatever you use namespaces for. And what you could have is a gateway per namespace or gateway per app, right? That's fine. That's possible. But as we saw, every time you deploy a gateway, you need to have an IP address allocated to that gateway, and then you need in the cloud, you would need like a cloud load balancer, which just again adds cost and adds complexity because you have more things to manage. So in the example in here, what they're showing is you can have a shared gateway in some kind of shared namespace or infrastructure namespace. And the shared gateway is serving multiple namespaces, multiple applications. Either two applications across the same namespace are attached to a single shared gateway, or applications across different namespaces, again, accessing a single gateway. And from that central shared gateway, you can manipulate, you can manage all like the certificates, for example. So you could do it from like a centralized place instead of having all the different teams doing this themselves.
Oh yeah, that's the big win right there, is the fact that the app teams don't have to deal with the TLS certs, right? You can now have like an organization or several, depending on the subdomains, but wildcards, right? That the people responsible for that set up the gateway, and then they basically allow the app teams to attach to that. Yeah. And now your app team never has to do it. And then once you get Cilium transparent encryption inside working, then now you have security that's in a way where the app developers never have to deal with the complexity of that, right? Especially app developers who are just working on internal services, and then the external teams, like it's all, you have a nice boundary in terms of responsibility.
For sure. And that's one of the appeal of the gateway API, is that kind of, that role-based model where you have different teams doing different things, and you have the apps developers and maybe would just create that kind of the route into the application, and you have more maybe like the more like networking security team that manages that side of the equation. So in what I wanted to do in this example, and I'll have a look at this picture, is a similar kind of picture, but I wanted to show how you can, again, connect multiple namespaces in an application to a gateway, but you could also prevent a namespace from being exposed via the gateway, right? So you might say, okay, I've got a public application that's my careers application where people can go and submit their resume to, online, right? And that's an online-facing application. I want to expose it, or I want to advertise it over BGP, whatever. This is kind of public. Then you might have another public application, maybe it's product specification. Again, that's the public stuff. You want to expose it. You can attach it to the same gateway APIs that have similar security considerations. Boom, connect it to it. And then you might also have an internal app that you don't want your, by accident, people to, connect to an existing gateway API because it's a private application with personal records and data. So you want to only attach HTTP route if the gateway API allows it, right? So we're going to be using selectors for this. Does it make sense as a kind of use case?
Oh yeah, I think once you show the demo, it's very obvious. Like You don't want HR stuff leaking out, right? um, and mistakes. People are human, right? So it it could accidentally attach a route, but I love this demo because it shows you that the people responsible for the gateway can make sure that the app teams you're providing some security and depth there, right? So
Yeah.
one person's mistake is not everybody's mistake, right?
Okay. So what I've got here is I've got a number of namespaces. The relevant one is the so you've got the product namespace where I've got my product app, and I'm using the same kind of eCHO pods and services, right? It's the same kind of principle. I've got my eCHO-careers in the careers namespace. That's going to be a public-facing app. I've got the eCHO-HR that's not, and eCHO-products that is public, and that they all live in their own namespaces. So before I go ahead and deploy it, so again, we've got deployed a gateway. We're going to deploy a gateway, which is going to be in the shared namespace. We call it infra-ns. And again, it's a Cilium gateway API, and it's listing a port 80. And this is slightly different here. Again, we talk about selectors. Here, what we're saying is we are only allowing namespaces to attach to this gateway API if the namespace has a specific label. Right? Share-gateway access equals true. And which is what we showed before. Product namespace has that label. Careers namespace has that label. HR namespace hasn't got that label. So that's a key part of the demo. What we've got as well is something very similar to what we saw before. We've got 3 routes that if you go to the /HR path, it will take you to the eCHO-HR. If you go to /product path, it will take you to the eCHO/product, and same for careers. Now, as you can see here, we've got these routes are in a different namespace from the gateway API they attach to. All right, so this route and this service are in the product namespace, and they are connected to the infra namespace. So
So basically, in this setup, the infra team is controlling the gateway, and then each one of these namespaces are like a individual app team, right? And they have the role-based access controls to basically create resources in their namespace, but the namespaces themselves are controlled at a higher, more sensitive level. So individual app teams can't relabel their namespace; they just work inside it.
Yeah. So so when we do a similar, we run curl command. If I run to /product, again, if we look back here just to remind ourselves, /product is here, public, /careers is here, it's a public service, and /private is the one we do not want to expose. So we want this curl request to product and careers to be successful. And we both, we'll get the 200 successful status code for both. Again, if I were to use bubble observe,
I mean, the route rules of the namespaces are basically requests to the API, right? They're like, please attach this route, and then the gateway gets to make the final decision, right?
That's right. And then if we try to do a HR, that's the one we don't want to access, we get a 404, right? So again, the 404 request, that's from an original get reply to /HR. So that doesn't work. And why? It's because, again, when we let's go to let's do a describe.
Yeah. Yeah, I was playing around with this too, and the describe gives you the status information.
Yeah, that's what we want. So what we can see is the route is not allowed, right? So the route has not been accepted when we try to attach the HTTP route from the HR namespace. And simply because, again, that HR namespace hasn't got the label that the gateway API expects. The route is not attached, and therefore connectivity doesn't work, and that's why we got a 4.4. And I've just added this command here that just extracts the status. So you see for product and career, it was accepted, and for HR, it was invalid. And cool, right? I mean, that's hopefully a good way to learn with a more of a kind of practical example.
It's always good to have practical examples.
Yeah, that's kind of how I learn. So I mean, I was just I know we've kind of gone over time, but I just wanted to make sure we covered all the different use cases. Any other kind of questions from anybody?
Oh yeah, there's one last question, and I think this is covered in the Gateway API lab that's already exists. But how there's two questions now. How to use a domain name under Gateway like Ingress, and I think that's covered in the initial lab, right? Where you basically could have certs, and you can associate the host name with each service, right? So
yeah, and you do TLS termination.
Yeah,
for HTTPS traffic. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so I would definitely encourage you to, if you're watching and you have the same question, go to the labs and find the Gateway API. We'll add it into the show notes to sort of as a background homework assignment, right? Like that is because I think that you said that was covered in a previous echo where the initial lab was covered. So yeah, so and then the last thing. Oh yeah, drop a link to the lab material. Absolutely, that's going to happen. And how does an authorized use case? How does an authorized use access HR route? Well, I guess the point is that the HR route's not publicly accessible, like by policy right now. I mean, what I would imagine is if you needed to have access to the HR route, what you would do is you would spin up an internal gateway, because this is the public gateway, right? You can have multiple gateways, right? Because
exactly.
A gateway is defined from a gateway class, so you can actually define a new gateway that's just for internal network use, and that gateway would allow the HR route, right? And so from an infra standpoint, now you can have one gateway just for internal use, and then one gateway for public use, and then as an app developer, you just have to make sure that the rules that you're writing, the HTTP route rules, right, are pointing to the right gateway, internal or external. So
yeah, spot on. Awesome. Cool. Well, that was fun.
Yeah, that was great. I think the Gateway API solves a ton of those real world corner cases that Ingress basically grew. All the Ingress solutions basically grew into, right? With and provides a much more scalable way. And we didn't talk about it, but the Gateway API itself is designed to be extensible, right? So you mentioned the experimental stuff. I was looking at the experimental channel, and they actually now have support for other protocols in the experimental channel, right? Like for instead of just the HTTP route rules, there's also GCP route and TCP route rules, which have different semantics, and the whole intent of this is to be extensible and grow, and to cover more use cases. in a way that the annotation syntax never could. I mean, look how expressive that declarative syntax is, and there's no way you could have mapped that all to like JSON packed annotations, right? I mean, it gets crazy. So
yeah, and actually,
so
I've
I
seen
think
there's a session at KubeCon next week, which is I have to find exactly, but it's some people have built something on top of the gateway API for some kind of multi-cloud connectivity, or so now people are using the gateway API as you know as some kind of API standard, which that makes sense, so that's that's one of, I'm hoping to catch 2 or 3 sessions next week in KubeCon on the gateway API, and because there is so much stuff happening as well on using the gateway API for east-west traffic, not just for north-south.
Oh,
and that's kind of where it looks like it's becoming the standard for not just for north-south, but also for service mesh internal traffic.
well, you want all the same features there too, right? You don't. It's not just at the across services, but east west inside the service definitions too.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
It's all the same features. It's just different levels of abstraction, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it feels like it's the right thing. Like you look at it and you're like, oh, I can actually read these manifests now, and I have a way better idea of what's going on than some of the ingress stuff. And I like the fact that you can take everything you just did, right? Even though you're using Metal LB, you can take all the other manifests you've written and then use it in anything that has the gateway API supported. So it's not like, oh, I switched from Nginx ingress to something else, and now everything is not going to work because it's.
And a lot of the I've been playing around in the gateway API for a few months now, but and some of the features have come in some other tools. Like Istio has had some gateway API support, or Console has had some gateway API support, and I've been able to use the same, some of their manifest and configuration in their own, tutorials in my own demo. It was just like the only thing I had to change is a gateway class to go from whatever to Cilium. But again, I think what the appeal here is, if you've got Cilium anywhere because it's your CNI, then you don't have to go install something else and manage the lifecycle of something else, because you get Cilium,
right?
They can do it for you. But yeah, no, it's awesome, and I may invite myself to eCHO in a few months' time to talk about more use cases.
Oh, it's just going to grow and grow. I mean, there's clearly momentum to extend what the gateway API can do, and it's just a matter of making sure Cilium keeps up, right?
Yeah,
and is able to do all of the new features that show up in the experimental channel. So, like I said, that snapshot releases are going to be so much fun, because they're going to roll this stuff in, and I love watching new features break in the snapshot.
Well, that's it. And again, I should give some kudos again to the team, Tom and Nick and Marco, Martin, all the team behind the service mesh development that has done an amazing job at just adding new features to the service mesh in the past few months. It's been great to be able to play with it.
It's now at the point where you can really touch and feel like, oh, this solves problems. Like it's actually pretty super easy to just spin up and start tackling these things without any of the pod sidecars, right? Like, because I guess we didn't even talk about it, but a lot of this that we're seeing in these demos is relying on that node level Envoy proxy that's embedded in the Cilium, right? So you're I think one of the API labs point this out, that you're spinning up, you're not getting two containers
That's it.
You're getting
Yeah.
you're spinning up one container when you do these deployments because you don't have the sidecars. But it's still using the Envoy proxy. It's just now at the node level because Cilium's able to use the eBPF data path, and instead of having to do it all inside the container namespaces.
Yeah, and maybe we take it for granted because we do this for a while. But yes, as you said,
Right.
it's it's still the Cilium service mesh sidecar less service mesh. Behind a lot of the demos we show and a lot of the kind of tooling, which in the labs maybe it doesn't matter that you have an extra. We only have like 5 or 6 spots. So,
Oh, right.
yeah, but yeah.
Actually, I think it matters just as much in the constrained resource labs because like every container matters. Like you end up, I can easily get to a situation where my kind machine doesn't let me have 20 containers, right? Because it's memory constrained and it's like nope. And it's like, well, that's just less I have to run the thing I'm trying to learn about. So it actually helps there too. It's just in a different way, right?
Yeah.
Like,
sure. Awesome.
Yeah, this was good. I think this is probably a good place to wrap up. We're just over an hour. So thanks a lot for jumping in.
Thanks everybody for joining, and thanks for having me.
Yep. Thanks everybody for the questions and the comments. We'll make sure that the show notes have the lab URLs for the relevant homework labs, and then I'm assuming as soon as this lab goes live, this is a work in progress, right? So as soon as this one goes live, like there'll be a blog announcement about it.
So some marketing around it. I'm sure.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Fantastic. Okay, thanks everybody.